On to the new session, which will be a Norwegian session. Just a second. Can you hear me, sir? Fine, thank you. So we're opening our afternoon session, which is a Norwegian session, and which is yet another reflection of the deepening cooperation between the school and Norway. Mr. Georg Apenes is a well-respected and known Norwegian public figure who has been a member of the parliament for over 20 years, who was the head of the state agency for data protection until 2010. The topic of his presentation is defined in the schedule on the data protection in the modern society, and I would like to give the floor to our esteemed expert. We hope to have this very interesting exchange. Mr. Apenes, the floor is yours.
I'm afraid I have to start off by correcting some of the personal data given out. I have not been a member of the Norwegian Parliament for 20 years, but I was a data protection commissioner of Norway for 21 years. And I guess that is the reason why I am here today, which I enjoy very much. And I would like to open with saying, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for inviting me to this seminar. I have studied the program and I'm most impressed. And I wish you all luck, and especially those who have the task to try to make another seminar next year with the same quality and the same possibilities of engagement. Well, do not ask what society can do for you, but what you can do for society. Those famous words of President John F. Kennedy are often quoted, sometimes in support of ideologically based objection to welfarism, other times in a rally for patriotism and nationalism. From a historic point of view, Kennedy's comment indicates the experienced fact that the exact and enduring location of a point of balance between the individual and the collective needs and requirements hardly can be found. We are facing a permanent dialogue, moving the pendulum constantly and never leaving it to rest. In the early 60s, American Democrats thought time was up to mobilize a sense of social responsibility. A generation later, Eastern Europe bid a dramatic but non-violent farewell to the idea of the prevalence of collectivism. There seem, ladies and gentlemen, today to exist a rather widespread acceptance of a general moral obligation of citizens to cooperate and thus to contribute scientifically sought information about themselves, provided the interest is motivated by efforts to gain new and useful knowledge. Medical research may, to some extent, be moved by personal academic ambition or economic benefit, but certainly also by defined social interests from future patients, the political bodies in the country proper. More understanding means better cures and more efficient prevention. Today, medical research is carried out within certain limits, often drawn by medical ethics and confirmed by legal or political procedures. In the Council of Europe, efforts are being made to develop general guidelines and principles in this area, taking the conflict into account, the dualism represented by the idea of autonomy versus the idea of paternalism. You know best, but we know better. One principle of general importance to data protection strategies, legislation and practice in Europe is to be found in Article 5 of the Convention for the Protection of Individuals with regard to automatic processing of personal data, which was adopted by the Council as early as in January 1981. Here, under litera B, it is stated that personal data undergoing automatic processing shall be, I quote, stored for specific and legitimate purposes and not used in a way incompatible with those purposes, end of quote. It is a viewpoint of rather common support and acceptance in the general current discussion of data protection philosophy that personal data collected and stored for one purpose cannot be used for other purposes without the support of existing domestic law or the expressed and informed consent of the citizen concerned. Exempli gratia, can a blood example collected from a presumed drunk driver lawfully be kept and later used as basis for the extraction of decisive evidence in a paternal case in the administration or in the courts? In post-industrial Europe and North America, we can witness traditional social norms and values being modified or extincted. One may discuss whether this is an entirely good or entirely bad development, but it is taking place without any doubt. In this process, it is apparent that the citizens' ability and willingness to accept individual moral responsibility is in a decline. It is argued that this may have something to do with the subjective feeling among a growing number of people of being deprived of autonomy, but by government, by technology, or social economic structures, by mass unemployment, urbanization, etc., etc. If this is correct observation, the efficient remedies for those who may want to restore not only the individual's motivation for protect integrity and privacy, but also his ability to actually meet personal responsibilities and moral as well as social obligations may be very, very hard to find. 27 years after having written his thought-provoking novel, Brave New World, Aldous Huxley found it worthwhile to check his own literary prophecies and wrote the essay Brave New World Revisited. In this book, Huxley quotes Thomas Jefferson stating that, I quote again, "People cannot be safe without information. Where the press is free and every man able to read, all is safe," end of quote. One of the other important suppliers of the philosophical blueprint for the modern liberal democracies, John Stuart Mill, was so firm in his belief in the rationality of man and the dominant influence of reason over the minds of mankind that he was convinced that the free flow of information and opinions combined with suffrage would guarantee political freedom, ideologically, rationality, and social democracy. The optimism of the 19th century simply believed that only two possibilities could exist when it comes to the impact of propaganda as conveyed by the press. Either it was true or it was false. Huxley also points out they did not foresee the development of a huge mass communication industry which is more concerned with the very idea of truth or false, but it's not concerned with the very idea of true or false, but with the demand for the entertainment, thus supplying the irrelevant, the unreal, and the fairy dreams. What has not been envisaged is the demand for diversions, distractions, and illusions in the post-industrial societies. Today, as I see it, we are still subscribing to the liberal ideas and ideals of Jefferson and Mill. Freedom of impression are the logical twin of the idea of the freedom of expression. And any suggested reservation as to the content of the purpose of the publicized information will immediately be met by the Jeffersons and the Mills of the late 20th century, who says, what you call abuse of the freedom of speech and print, I regard myself just a fair use. What you want to suppress is a description of ideological, institutional, or argumentative alternatives to the present, the status quo. Your reference to privacy, decency, and taste is just an attempt to strangle reforms and fight political or cultural opposition. The responsible press and its organization have for years recognized the problem and has, through different measures, tried to avoid political interference, legislation of any form of pre- or post-censorship. Press councils, press ombudsmen, and educators stressing the ethical aspects of journalistics in education and training are examples. Still, we see that even conservative papers, radio and television stations gradually move, it seems, to stretch the borderlines. Their willingness to use intrusion to disregard what traditionally has been regarded as the private sphere and to pay attention to circumstances and conditions that have been regarded as adiaphora and give it a more or less convincing context to the main subject of the story seems gradually taking on bigger proportions. It is not only the president who is in focus anymore. It is his wife and his mistress and his children. Also, his more remote social framework is being investigated. And, as we know, Google is a very potent tool for such undertakings. What the society can do is to be somewhat more critical when it decides to collect, store, and use personal data. As a general rule, we may say that any data once collected may be subject to use sooner or later, and any data subject to use may be misused. It is very hard to believe that absolutely all the information collected and stored for administrative and scientific purposes actually contribute a net benefit when it is measured with the risk of intrusion. It is interesting to note that both the courts and the press councils in many countries seem to be willing to accept the ethics derived from the concept of good intentions. My point is simply this: to advertise tobacco or alcoholic beverages with the intent to persuade people to do lawful but harmful things should not be defended with a reference to the principle of freedom of information. It has in fact nothing to do with information, but of suggestions. It is within the scope of the free speech, however, to publish and present arguments to reform, for instance, the drug policies in a country. But it is not the same to do this as to use the arena of the press to persuade the readers, listeners, viewers to use heroin. I now would like to turn to another area where the discussions are running high in our part of the world at present. That's genetics and privacy protection. The decoding of the human genome reached a preliminary climax some years ago when scientists in charge of Project Hugo declared that a draft of the entire human genome had now been assembled. The compilation of findings from sub-projects coordinated in this impressive and worldwide undertaking may be subject to some adjustments and corrections in the future. But in essence, the mapping is finished. It was celebrated all over the world by scientists and the medical community, but also by politicians and government officials, which means those who are in charge of the efforts of trying to meet great and fast-growing expectations connected to health, welfare, and lifespan. But compared with the reception of previous spectacular discoveries and inventions within the field of medicine, like the penicillin and the anesthetics, we were this time able to notice some doubts, at least, in the comments of the individual blessings of the opening of this new frontier in the history of man, a new reality enabling us to carry rationality a great step further, to regulate, administer, plan, and control a better common future. Genetics will sometime in the not-so-distant future really make it possible to plan for success. Some of the underlying questions might, for instance, be whether such plans are designed by individuals in their search for a better health for themselves and their kin, or the lawmakers and governments wanting to raise the quality of their nation, or simply whether the motor is the search for profit by the multinational pharmaceutical conglomerates. Some of you are old enough to recall that President Clinton, in his public statement from the lawn of the White House, stressed the ambiguity of the new era entered. Without mentioning his name, he indirectly referred to the problem so often and so strongly articulated in his books and essays by the Finnish philosopher Georg Apenes. Rationality and wisdom do not always mean the same. They do not always coincide. Personally, I would like to express my concern of the dangers we do not see, maybe because we do like to see them, and therefore do like Admiral Lord Nelson did when he put his field glass on his blind eye. Although the accumulation of positive knowledge in this area seems to accelerate, we may still have some years ahead of us before the practical possibility of wide-scale human engineering is integrated in our health services. Now a new area has been entered, the area of epigenetics, promising to some, scaring to others. Even those who, with minimal reservations, loudly admit that these new possibilities may be used for purposes that a majority in our culture today regard as negative and harmful. As opposed to the scientific breakthrough manifested in Hiroshima, the advent of genetics has been well advertised. There has been very little secrecy surrounding the research. Governments and the pharmaceutical industry have willingly funded the works. We know much more about what we are approaching this time compared with the nuclear technology breakthrough a couple of generations ago. To me, it is obvious that genetics represents a challenge to traditional concepts of privacy. I can think of no more sensitive, intimate information about an individual than the pathological potentiality of her or him laid down in the genetic layout embodied in her or his cells. What then is so special about genetic information? I think that the general public, as well as academics, politicians, and legislators already regard, or very soon will do so, genetic information as very sensitive information belonging to the most intimate realm of the private sphere. The main reason for this may be the popular conception that genetic information on the individual carry knowledge of some sort of determining rails which sooner or later will lead to the individual to contain unavoidable harms, problems, or advantages, like being able to smoke 40 cigarettes a day for 60 years without developing lung cancer. Will it be possible to preserve fundamental privacy values as expressed in the Council of Europe's Convention 108 and the European Directive? The problem starts when findings from person A also tells us interesting things about B, C, and D. Should they be informed? Under what conditions should it be a legal obligation to try to contact the ignorant rest of the alphabet in order to give them certain facts so that they themselves can decide to seek counseling for change of lifestyle, medication, or, more dramatically, to reconsider a planned pregnancy or a planned future? Would Ronald Reagan have been campaigning for the presidency of the United States if he himself had known he would develop Alzheimer's disease? Would he have been supported by voters if they knew what was to come? Or would orchestrated leaking of a secret have spoiled his chances of winning the election? I'm just asking. In politics and social formations, historically things like biological fatherhood did not play a major role in the legal or administrative developments of a society. Now, this age of relative innocence may soon be over. It may be of little interest who fathered the prince, but the genetic heritage he left behind can be of decisive value from a curative or therapeutical point of view. Should the person or institution carrying out the collection of genetic information be obliged to seek the information consent also from the relatives? Or should the collector, depending on his findings, actively inform those who may be in the risk zone? If so, how much time and how much resources should be expected to be used? To which extent should the answer to this last question be relative to the possibility of preventing or delaying the manifestation of a malfunction or disease? No. Finally, some very private or rather personal remarks, because I see that time is running from me. Norway is this year celebrating its 200 years of having his written constitution. During some spring weeks in 1814, a handful of presumably representative members of the general public gathered after the USA and France. Norway was historically among the first nations where individual citizens enjoyed full freedom and the sovereign absolute power was regulated by law. But honestly, most people were not very much occupied with human rights 200 years ago in Norway. They went about their daily challenges in the fjords, in the barns, and in the fields. Even though small libraries popped up regionally in Norway in the late 17th century, we have no indication showing that Norwegian peasants asked for literature on human rights in general or the safeguarding through a constitution the individual rights of self-determination. Statistics is very rare in this field, but as far as I know, an essay concerning human understanding by John Locke, published in 1690, or Critique of Practical Reason by Immanuel Kant, published about 100 years later, were never found in these small libraries. Is philosophy is given impetus to the development of political institutions in Norway as well as in the rest of Europe? Yeah, probably yes. But collecting enthusiasm amongst the general public, the individuals who little by little should be given political power or become voters? No, at all. Then in 2013, Edward Snowden happened. I myself belong to those who said, well, Snowden's finding must be food for thought. I expect my fellow Norwegians to be more careful in the future. To my great astonishment and disappointment, as a serious survey revealed, my fellow countrymen preserved their trust in the internet. 62% answered that the Snowden incident have had no influence and their conduct when operating their electronic tools. 8%, however, said that they have been considering using some special words less often. So the Snowden incident did not produce, at least not in my country, the change of conduct which I had thought and which I also must admit I have hoped. Finally, it is my humble opinion that we, at least not today, do not have the tools that at the same time offers protection of individual privacy and at the same time give personal information to projects and plans generally accepted as being constructed for the common good. Defense being an example. In the United States, there is an old saying running like this: you can't have your pie and also eat it. This is why nobody, as far as I can see, have come up with a scheme comprising both the two, privacy and legitimate social interest. The situation in 2014, I think, is that we may have to choose if it is possible to develop systems and technologies that may promote classical privacy, which I myself very much doubt. Let us give it a try. If it is not possible, however, let us just note what George Orwell might have been right in 1949 when he wrote in his novel 1984, "Those who owns the past will also own the present, and those who own the present will own the future." Or, more bluntly, we might quote the Stasi boss Erich Mielke, who said, "In order to understand everything, I have to know everything." Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your attention.
Dear colleagues, our expert with exactitude of a jeweler really gave 30 minutes for his presentation and left an hour for discussion. Please, a colleague sitting just opposite me. Good day. Ilyin Roman from Vologda. My question would be, what is your take on the concept of technological singularity? And will the humankind, together with philosophy, technology and science, will it have the time to realize the problem that technologies bring to us? Shall we have the time?
I really do hope so. I'm not quite sure, though. I think what has happened last year is the fact that we have discovered that the transparency of the whole world is already there. And that, in my opinion, trying to find an answer to your question, as I understand it, might be very, very hard. For instance, some people say that we have to teach each other to use cryptifying our messages. But that is done for a generation already with correspondence on the net. And still, some people have been able to crack the codes and being able to go on by sending encrypted messages to each other.
Так, сударыня из Высшей школы экономики, прошу.
Madam from High School of Economics, please, you now have the floor. Пеголева Дарья from Nizhny Novgorod speaks English.
To ask a question.
Тогда поближе к микрофону, вас
Окей.
плохо слышно.
I would like to ask you a question which is correlated with the information and freedom of expression. As we know, in Russia last year was adopted the law according which some internet sources, blogs, and so on can be restricted without any judicial decision. My question is, do you think that such legal acts in country can have an impact on the freedom of expression and on the realization of such rights which are given by the Article 10 of the European Convention of Human Rights?
As I understand your question, you would like to know what my opinion is on the fact that some sources or some canals are closed down by the government without any court decision at all. And I think that's cannot be tolerated. At least they have to go through the legal formal procedure in order to obtain. They have to explain why they intend to do it and how long it is taken and how this is going to be, the general public is going to be informed with the reasons why and how long it's going to stay at that. Well, I must say though that if in such a situation, we simply have to depend on the other medias collecting attention to what actually has happened and try to raise an opinion amongst, well, if not politicians, those who are concerned, elections, intellectuals, academics, and those who, like myself, think that historically privacy has been a great advantage, even though it seems today that its area is fading out. Russia is a member of the Council of Europe. And this question that you brought to me might, and I think it very quickly through, might be brought into the Court of Human Rights.
Прошу, сударыня, вам слово. К микрофону.
Сергеева Наталья, город.
Natalia Sergeyeva from Samara also speaks English.
Tell me, please, do you personally approve using private information such as telephone calls or internet correspondence in order to prevent terroristic attacks? Thank you.
No, I don't do that if I know that this is for my eyes only and my mind only. I don't share those kinds of informations, especially not if it is sort of sensitive with a third person. If that answers your question, it does. Thank you.
Вопрос из Болгарии, коллеги. Станимир, прошу вас.
Question from Bulgaria. Stanimir, please, you now have the floor. First, I would like to thank you for the lecture. For me professionally, it was very interesting. In Bulgaria, the Commission to Protect Privacy and Private Data is something very new, but it enjoys great power. It has the right to impose very serious fines. And now a serious conflict is between this company and people of free professions, such as advocates and notaries. They are registered as people who are allowed to operate this personal data, but the Commission forbade them to make photostat copies of domestic ID documents, because in Russia the police still managed to put some codes which allow to these ID documents can provide any other information with the exception of like the name, date of birth and social security number. It also put in sex. It also put in some barcode-like data in medical, race, and you name it. And nowadays the Commission has barred to make these photocopies based on this fact that we have no right to look this data. The question is like this, but we need it because the court recognizes this photocopy as proof that this person really attended an office of the notary or advocate, and indeed he did this title, this deed, whatever. What is your comment on this? Thank you.
My only comment would be, I do hope that this question is brought up in your National Assembly, because apparently there is something too short in the legislation on this area, since the court can do things like that.
No, we won the case in court, but still every case there is different practice. There is no common practice in terms of what verdict the courts may return. Sometimes they may return the verdict to support the plaintiff, and the other kind the defendant. So there is no common practice among the courts. In this sense,
It's simply a question of having the Ministry of Justice issuing directive to the entities proper to say that if a case like this and this and this should pop up, your authority would be limited to do this and this and this. Nothing more.
Продолжаем. Коллега, вот.
thank you very much. Artur Rudakov from Rostov-on-the-Don. Tell me, please, do you know any cases of court persecution for violation of legislation for the protection of data, be it administrative or civil or criminal, something really serious when they will prosecute for not defending the privacy?
Well, I can only answer for my own country, and there was one case coming our way, and that was the directive from the Union on data retention. And a majority of the Norwegian Parliament said that we are going to have that kind of legislation, we in Norway as well. But then, 1.5 years later, the European Court of Human Rights turned the whole idea of the retention directive down and said that this is against fundamental human rights in the Union. So this cannot be the Union as such, or any of the member states or any of the associated states integrate in their national legislation. And that was the most dramatic and most dangerous example I can think of by now. I would think that others are also, other examples might be found in other countries, but here and now I am not quite familiar with them.
Прошу, сударыня, вам слово. Да.
Lady, I have the floor. Anna Martinova from Sochi. Mr. Apenes, I will ask my question in Russian, if you will. Internet gives us a possibility to users by hiding their IP addresses and their real data using nicknames. At time, the users very often, as they have discussion, especially on some burning questions, they can use very harsh wording and may even use verified information. Tell me, please, where is the dividing line between freedom of speech and all permissiveness, and how the situation is regulated in the EU?
It is certainly right that it is possible to exchange viewpoints or concepts on the net without being discovered. Now, what is on the agenda concerning the Snowden case is not this the content of the messages using harsh word or indiscretions, but the possibility of register who is contacting who and how often and what might other people might be drawn into with their. So this is what the people call the metadata, which is as potent as many of the messages in clear text. I don't know if that answers your question, does it? No, not really. Try once more, please.
Yes, she asked, where is the dividing line between freedom of speech and people who go unpunished and all permissiveness? What I mean is the technical, yes, technicality, I understand it. I'm interested in this relation of your entity and you as a specialist. What's your take to the moral aspect of this matter? How do you think how you could tolerate, how tolerant is the EU towards such situations when people abuse each other online, and how do you regulate the situation at all? Or they may knowingly use unverified and untrue information.
The freedom of speech, unlike what a lot of people seem to think, is not an area where you can say just anything you want to anything you would like to tell things about. So there is, and in many countries, this is not regulated by law or legal decisions, but by decency, by moral or traditions or moral concepts, and I think that also must apply. There is a certain limit of what you can say to each other and about each other. But no, it's very hard to draw through legislation a criteria for what is okay and what is not okay. And that, of course, is things that happen. You see it from the informations I read from the courts in Norway. More and more often there is messages sent by the culprit from his or her phone or PC, which is rather harsh and which is taken up by the accuser as being against the limits of free expression. And sometimes they are given the support by the court, and others they are turning down. I had an example in my original manuscript where I tried to enlighten this, but unfortunately it fell out because I was too long. But a Norwegian Supreme Court a couple of years ago published a decision where a Norwegian newspaper had published a conversation between a politician and a member of the general public, which was apparently not meant for publication. And the court said that the intent of the publication was to enlighten the general public, to show what kind of a politician he was or what kind of things were going on and so forth. Another case was a female member of parliament in England who was a very, very strong critic of any legislation which was meant to be in support of feminism, or especially the part of feminism which was meant to take care of sexual attraction between people of the same sex. She was very, very strongly against lesbians and lesbianism. Now, one day, this lady moved out of her house and took up a relation with another lady. And this was written about and commented in the newspapers in England. And she brought them to court. But the English court said that no, this is of general interest. This is of general importance. They can use their right of expression for in a case like this.
Продолжаем. Вот коллега, который...
We continue. A colleague in third row, please. Yes, you wanted to ask a question, please. No, you didn't? As you will, please. Sergey from Volgograd. My question is a torrent file. Do you think that torrents, will they be banned, torrent files, in the very near future? And the next question is, it's related to piracy party. And when they started to ban and outlaw torrent files in Europe, they came up with Internet Piracy Party, which even attempted to go to parliament. Do you think this party, political party, does it have a political future or not? Because nowadays they even have some number of votes in parliament.
I think, personally, I think that those kinds of political phenomena in the present political landscape, both in Scandinavia and as in the rest of Europe, might be fought with words and meanings and expressions and arguments, and not by being declared unlawful. That's a very puristic and rather simple approach, I know that, but I think that's the only way in a liberal democracy like our own you can do anything about it, as long as they behave legally. And the piracy parties in Sweden, at least, we don't have it in Norway, in Sweden has not so far been prosecuted for anything illegal.
Так. Пожалуйста, коллега. Да, не часто вы нас будете, прошу.
Dear colleague, you don't often. I have a question. First, I have a remark about piracy party. Please remember to give your name. Burtsev from Krasnodar. A remark about piracy party as from the member. Piracy party exists in Norway since 2012. In 2013 election, it gathered less than 1%. Piracy movement is best developed in Germany, where in some land the piracy party would rank as number 3 in election. But it's not about its name, it's about the same principles which we're discussing right now. Openness, freedom of speech, freedom of dissemination of information, and so on. And all these good things. And my question would be more technological. What do you think? Nowadays we have a number of ways to remain anonymous online, and a number of ways how you can calculate this classical battle between the shell and the armor. Tell me please, can you remain absolutely anonymous online in 10 years' time?
I'm not a technologist myself, but I would say that today it would be very, very hard to establish yourself as an anonymous partaker in the happenings of the internet, the political files. But I cannot exclude the possibility of in the future things might pop up that could be used for such a purpose. It's new to me that we have it in Norway. I can't see any of the polls where they had made any impression, and they don't have any representative neither on the parliament or in any of the regional houses of representatives. But I might be ill-informed. What was the next part of your question?
Нет, вы ответили про анонимность.
Well, you already answered both anonymity and about piracy party. Thank you.
Идем дальше. Мария, прошу.
We continue. Maria, you now have the floor. Maria Guli from St. Petersburg, speaking.
To begin from a little bit afar, I have a friend in Sweden, and as far as I really have very little knowledge on Sweden in general, but as far as I was given to understand by my friend, by using the number of the social security card, you can somehow get access to the number of medical accounts, and then you can online track the medical history of a person, and then somehow you get, by properly legal ways, the bank accounts and stuff. So you get pretty much whole biography of a person. However, on the other hand of that, you also get to know how much money service, as in civil servant gets, and you also get to understand how transparent the whole system is. So how would you say I don't know how it is in Norway. I'm guessing pretty much similar. Would you comment on how you correlate the transparency, which is one of the key values in Western democracy system, with the privacy of a person, even though they be civil servants? Thank you.
It's a very hard question you ask, because traditionally the Norwegians has been a little more skeptic about things like this. I read about the cases and what if you obtain the social security number, what you can find out if you really want to. And that also applies to people who are working in the government, of course. I honestly haven't read about anything like that from Norway so far. But the real trouble and the real problem that I didn't touch very much upon in my original intervention is that most people don't give a damn. And I talked a little about my expectations of the results of the Snowden affair, and when less than half the number of people are being asked say that you're familiar with the expression, well, I haven't done anything wrong, so why should I fear anything? I trust the government's people, they want me well, they give me treatment, so why should I fear them? So why should I insist on having anything excluding from general insight? Well, when I'm giving lectures, I heavily protest those kinds of arguments and say something like this. If I go into my bathroom back home in Norway, it's not to do anything indecent, unhygienic, unlawful, immoral there, but still I close the door and I take down the curtain, because in that situation I would like to be alone and not being served by anybody, even though they might be nice people. And my experience is that when you use that kind of very simple and maybe rather vulgar example, people nod their heads and say, well. So my moral message is that we all would like to be left alone in some situations. We all would like to keep something secret for ourselves. We don't like to have it spread all over. And the strange things I read in the Swedish press about the incident you're referring to is that so very, very few has been reacted to it. They say, well, sorry, I'm not happy with it, but I trust the surroundings and that they will keep it for themselves and be quiet of what their findings are. And if not, well, what then?
Артак, прошу вас.
Report. My name is Artek Oskanyan, Yerevan School for Political Studies. My question has two aspects in it, and both are relating to the social media and the e-democracy that is going on lately. The first part of the aspect is that a relatively younger generation is very involved in internet activism, but that has its negative effect, as for them thinking that being active or online is enough to consider themselves active citizen, which is not the real case. The civil activism in reality is going out actually, talking to people, explaining them whatever they want and delivering the messages. Most of the youngsters think that putting some post or sharing their opinions online is enough, but it's not. That's the first part of it. Would you comment on that? And the second part is, right now in our National Assembly, I'm an expert for the Parliamentary Committee on Defense and Security, by the way. We have a draft legislation on prohibiting hidden users online, like posting some kind of messages from hidden profiles. Let's say someone would put a post that some kind of official, public official has done something, and then a media resource would link it, and it would become news. In reality, that news is false. It didn't happen in reality. But as far as there is a linkage that someone posted in his Facebook account, let's say, there's a reference. They're referencing to it and putting it as a news. So this draft legislation is going to punish the people who are posting this kind of information, which is untrue, but still it's kind of limiting their rights. How would you comment on that kind of draft legislation? Is it good practice? Would it be possible in European Union? Thanks.
Thank you very much. Question one was very easy. I am 100% agree with you. I think we live in times when youngsters think that the fact that they are surfing on the net gives them some kind of image as being politically or socially active, which is, yeah. I have 7 grandchildren myself, and I know what I'm talking about. When it comes to question 2 about trying to punish or make illegal messages which are anonymous, but can be traced back to a sender. When I listen to you, my impulse was to say that I agree with you. On the other hand, I have 6 years as being an active journalist behind me, and I know that if the media were prohibited technically or legally from using tipping from the general public about wrongdoings, about rumors, about things that was not as it should be, as they should be. Then many media, especially those media we need, would lose their teeth because leakage is a democratic value, in my opinion. It sounds rather harsh when I put it in that way, but many things history shows has been brought to our attention by somebody who have good reasons for not being in public, but gave some indications that civil servants have done something wrong, money had been used wrongly, and so on and so forth. If that should be prohibited, I think we might make some bad experiences little by little. But I mean, if these messages contains accusations that are unlawful, stating that he or she has done something, been a part of something which is simply hasn't happened, it would be possible to go to the police, wouldn't it? Or then the police might go to the court and say that this is something which is circulating on the net, which is very harmful to this citizen proper. So I'm afraid I cannot give you a square answer, but I understand your concern, and I'm very much looking forward to see where do you find the balance by being open, which is a good thing, and taking care of the integrity of the individual citizen on the other. Thank you.
Так, вопрос из Ингушетии я видел. Отпал уже вопрос? Хорошо. Наиль, прошу вас.
Thank you, Nail, Bashkortostan Republic. I am a lawyer by profession, not by. And I, as a lawyer, I know about many gaps in our criminal law, procedural law, that allows to get a sanction of the court. And so after bugging the conversation, for example, bugging the cell phone, and get a sanction of the court to arrest someone. I know there are some gaps in our criminal code. Do you have any mechanism or institutions in your country that are not parliamentary? So then non-parliamentary extrajudicial institutions that would limit excessive authorities or special agencies, for example, from bugging or just from unlawful activities. Is there any oversight thing that exists in your country?
If the activity as such is lawful, nobody can bug it. But if they have a suspicion, like the police, that something is taking place somewhere, they might lawfully go to the court and say that this is taking place, we are suspicious of the activities, we would like to bug it. And they can get the permission, which is limited by time, and put in microphones and see if there is something to it. If they don't find anything, they have generally, or as a main principle, the duty to inform those who have been wrongly bugged. But yes, there is, by administrative decision, a possibility in Norway to bug or to use tools or that otherwise would be unlawful. It's actually stated in the law and that especially applies to the police taking care of unlawful immigration. It takes also into consideration spies and such more spectacular things. And it's always giving great attention in the media.
Так, еще есть время, прошу. Коллега из Петербурга.
Hello, my name is Artem Filatov and I'm from St. Petersburg. Thank you very much for your being here. My question is not very certain. It's something like crude oil but not refined. You were told a lot here about anonymous actions in the web and some regulation of the web which requires users not to be as anonymous as maybe they want. And I've just thought that now in the world it's the application named Secret is very popular. It's becoming extremely popular. I mean the application for iPhone, iPad and so on. This application allows users to post anonymously. Sometimes it's just something naughty and nothing more. Sometimes, and there are such cases, it's something like commercial secrets, something like political secrets, not of large scale like multinational corporations, but on some level. So it seems to me that users would like to be anonymous in some sector of the internet, yes? It's not a large scale, but some sector, yeah? So if we will try to predict the future, will the governments leave some space for anonymous actions on the web? Or it's not okay and it will not be done? So just maybe some thoughts from you, some predictions. Thank you very much.
I don't have any predictions, but I have some experiences. And my experience when it comes to the net is that I too often had said to my fellow workers and in my office and myself, is it really possible? Can that be done? And I had been in charge of data protection in Norway for almost 1 year when I asked some of my engineers or technicians, when you talk about security or secure solutions, what do you actually mean? Is it really literally secure? Then they blushed and said, no, what we really mean is almost quite sure, secure. And if they, today, like the method you described now, if this is popular, and if authorities or competing companies all over the world think that things are happening there that we should know about, they will find their way around. Be sure, be sure. As I told you some minutes ago, I'm not a technician myself, I'm a lawyer. And I don't understand all the things that's actually taking part on the net. But my experience so far is that every time they have tried to draw up a design where the user were told that we have invented something for you that you might be of interest to, especially if you're willing to pay for it, and it's quite sure and no problem whatsoever. I think that it's just a question of time before they can walk around it.
Коллега, прошу, средина ряда. Да-да. Да.
Спасибо.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll ask in Russian, if I may. Saratov, Agency of Social Technologies. And it turned out that we are such people who are involved in the production of content. And so I would like to look at this problem from a different angle. It's a very important issue in Saratov. So there are always educational courses, training courses, very important. So different educational training courses related to IT hygiene, IT security. So what's your opinion concerning what's your opinion about this phenomenon of information hygiene? Do we need to educate people? Do we need to do it in a centralized way? Do we need to train people? There's information hygiene of a human being. So how important it is?
I don't know. The only thing I can, and now I am trying to be prophetic, is that these questions that you brought up is going more and more hot in the future. Because I think next to warfare, the battle of health